Let me try to locate the fall of Western universities in bloom, okay? If Mr. Bloom's in the crowd, I'm sorry. But anyway, Nietzsche and German philosophy, mainly Nietzsche. Woody Allen films and the dark music from Africa that started influencing American youth. Sort of, we don't want to call anyone a racist, but that sounded funny to me when I read it in the closing of The American Mind, this dark music of Africa, you know. What could he be talking about, you know? Well, I mean, we all know that Mick Jagger looks like a photo negative of Little Richard, but I wondered what he was talking about. In any case, there's the neoconservative attack, the paleoconservative attack on Nietzsche makes him an interesting topic of debate in one sense. The current debates over interpretation in the areas of law, politics, and elsewhere make him an interesting figure to discuss. And then there's this issue of Nietzsche's return, which I would like to make historically contextual for you. I discussed, being a product of the 60s, my first encounter with him, and many young people encountered him at the time, and it was exhilarating because as we read through these texts, we will see that Nietzsche's always valorizing youth, creativity, life-affirming activity, always valuing misinterpretation, polemically, hyperbolically, you know, inciting people to laugh at authority and so on. And so there was a great exhilarating effect of Nietzsche in the 60s, which I think sort of washed out in the 70s, early, mid, late 80s, the way most things did, kind of settled into sort of a 30-something whining. I mean, I don't know the people who make that show, I'm sorry, but I mean, I watched it a few times and it was just, you know, suicide, please, anything but this, you know. I mean, Abby Hoffman, whatever, anything but this whining, pathetic, pale shadow of a human life, you know. But then a younger generation comes along and we have what's called Nietzsche's return. And this began in the late 80s. And the return to Nietzsche at first was quasi-nostalgic, and then it became humorous. And I also want to bring some of that in, because there are many humorists, and I mean, it would be absolutely out of the spirit of Nietzsche not to do this. There are many humorous uses for the text of Nietzsche. There was an issue of Semiotext magazine, which I really enjoy. I don't know how many of you have ever even seen Semiotext, but it's a bizarre little out-of-the-way journal that publishes all kinds of strange esoterica on the edge of the academic discourse. Bizarre conspiracy theories, strange political theories, and they did an issue on Nietzsche that began with a box that checked off style of interpreting Nietzsche, and the first one was shameless opportunist, you know. The second one was joker who's never read Nietzsche. Third was serious but confused academic, and you just checked off your box and mailed in the result of the survey to Semiotext after having read some of the articles on the new Nietzsche. And that's actually the thing that was the most in the spirit of Nietzsche in the whole issue was that box. Because Nietzsche has a tremendous, and I mean one of the reasons that one can stand Nietzsche at his darkest moments in his text, one reason that one can tolerate looking some of Nietzsche in the face and being able to stand it is because of these moments of incredible hilarity. I mean, just absolutely hilarious. I'll try to generate some of those as we read through here, because Nietzsche does, I think, as we proceed, we'll see that Nietzsche isn't a place to go for consolation. You know, this is not a place one would go for consolation, as you wouldn't pick it up like one of these feel-good pop psychology books that I find in the airports all the time. For every group imaginable, you know. Unbelievable culture. Yeah. Books for depressed housewives ages 25 through 31. I mean, I didn't know you needed a book. You've got 8 talk shows. Why'd you need a book? Books for depressed husbands ages 27 through 40, and so on. And just everybody's kind of depressed, and these are... Well, Nietzsche's texts are not a place to go for consolation along any of those dimensions. In fact, one of the things that will be importantly denied in my account, it may just be mine, but in my account of Nietzsche, will be the very possibility of anything like a psychology as anything more than just one more narrative about yourself that you decide to adopt. I mean, you could do that, right? I mean, in fact, it's disheartening today how frequently you meet someone a few years later and, oh no, I'm off the Valium now, you know, I'm in the Reverend Moon's church and I'm off the Valium. I mean, who knows? People, today what Nietzsche saw as an incredible project, which was to invent oneself, now is a marketable thing. I mean, that at the mall, you can go to the Gap and invent a persona, read a few of the right magazines that go with the clothes that you buy at the Gap and so on. So self-creation in an intensified market economy is something that Nietzsche would have had to deal with had he unfortunately lived longer. But he claimed to have lived out of season, and I will claim that his view is relevant to our own times. Now, let me return for a moment to this interpretation business, and then a few quotes from Nietzsche. I think that we should use a little Nietzsche to spice up the opening. We've talked about these three sets of problems, three paradoxes, including my paradox of trying to present this, both by doing justice to the wit, the interpretation, developing my own strong interpretation, and doing it under a changed mode of communication, which is extremely important to Nietzsche. He's a writer, a writerly writer. He's been referred to as someone who wanted to play Plato to his own Socrates. Let me explain that remark briefly. And this may help introduce you to Nietzsche a little bit. Playing Plato to your own Socrates would mean this. Socrates didn't write anything. Some of you may know that. Socrates didn't write. Plato wrote about him. So it was as though Socrates sort of lived this character that comes down to us in the constructed form of Plato's narrative, about which it has always seemed to me to be totally uninteresting to ask, was that really what he was like? For God's sakes, we don't even normally want to know that, really. I mean, if you've seen a great Billy the Kid movie, and there have been so many that a few of them have had to be good, right? You see a really good Billy the Kid movie, it's not fun to go, was Billy really like that? I mean, who cares, you know? I mean, because that one was interesting and fascinating. So Plato's Socrates is such a fascinating character. I'm not sure what Socrates was really like. There are reasons, I think, and Nietzsche makes some of them clear, why in principle I couldn't be sure about that. Part of our fascination with time machines might be with interpretation, actually. Maybe our fascination with time machines, you know, like Back to the Future, Back to the Past, and now Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventures Through Time. Well, I like some of those, but I'm digressing a bit, but forgive me here. Bill and Ted's latest bogus adventure is a parody of Ingmar Bergman's The Seventh Seal, where they go to hell and play Twister and Battleship with the Devil instead of chess. That will be a symptom of a postmodern culture. See, modernist humans will be worried about death. It will reverberate in sort of their being. And because there won't be a field of meaning to answer it, the problems of life and death, we will get the problem called nihilism. But when you cross a certain threshold point, a threshold point where people's real issue is, am I alive now? And that question seems radically undecidable, then you get cultural artifacts like Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure.